So, good morning. Is everyone ready? Yes? Okay. So, today we will start with the first panel of discussion. So, we have two talks for today. One is from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock in the morning, and the other is from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So as what Heli said, the theme of today's discussions is about theater and society and social movements, as we call them. So I'm Lisa Ito from UP Diliman and the Concerned Artists of the Philippines, and I will be moderating this first panel this morning. We will be holding the discussions in English because we also have guests and visitors from different countries who are all theater and cultural workers in their respective countries. So take this as an opportunity to interact and ask questions from our resource speakers and guests. Now, we will start with the first panel. The theme of our panel today is called Theater with a Cause. Of course, this panel will start with the theme of theater and social movements in the Philippines. And today we have two resource speakers and one discussant whose work is all connected by the lives behind and at the forefront of theater and art with a cause. They are all cultural workers for the greater good. And before we start today's discussion, we were supposed to have three panelists, no? Three resource speakers, but one of them could unfortunately not make it today to Rojas City. I would like to convey the sad news that has befallen the family of our panelist, Ariane Carandang, who is unable to join us. Ariane is the artistic director of Sinag Bayan, or Sining na Naglilingkod sa Bayan, or Arts for the People. It's a nationwide organization of cultural workers and artists who do work to develop the skills of the youth in rural areas in the Philippines. But Ariane is unable to join us today due to a recent tragedy which has befallen her family. Her father was killed last January 17 in what was believed to be related to a land dispute in their province of Nueva Ecija, and was put to rest yesterday. So that's why that's all we know for now, and that's also the reason why Ariane could not be here with us to share her experience. And before we start, I hope we can all offer a moment of silence for our colleague's father and for her family. Thank you. And from this collective wish that we have for peace and for justice, we will begin our discussion. I will call one of the three panelists, Mr. Karlo Mongaya, Mr. Edwin Quinsayas, and Ms. Rosalie Cerudo to please take their seats here in front. Yes. Kung saan kayo? Ayun. Sige. Okay na. So our first speaker is an instructor at the Department of Filipino and Filipino Literature at the UP College of Arts and Letters. He is pursuing his master's degree in Filipino, in Araling Filipino, with a thesis on revolutionary journalism during the early 1980s. Now, to further talk about his involvement as a progressive academic and a teacher, as well as his research on the history of revolutionary cultural work in Panay, let us welcome Mr. Karlo Mongaya.
Anyway, good morning everyone. I am Karlo Mongaya. I'd be talking about the development of revolutionary cultural work in the island of Panay. No, and I'm an academic. I'm a scholar who is based in UP Diliman in Quezon City. But I've spent a lot of time here in Panay Island. I used to study in UP Visayas in Miagao, Iloilo, and was exposed to different cost-oriented groups and the people's movements in Iloilo. But I'm not involved in revolutionary cultural work. It just so happens that as a scholar of Philippine studies and Philippine history with focus, specialization on media and cultural studies, this is part of the work that I do. So this presentation is actually notes, not written by me, no, but by Roger Felix Salditos, no, or Maya Moore, no, who has been a force, a personality who has been behind much of this, the development of this area, no, of cultural work. So when I was asked by Donna Miranda of Green Papaya and Jejak-Tabi Exchange, no, to join us this morning, I was thinking that I would be talking to fellow academics, fellow scholars, fellow cultural researchers, and fellow people, no, artists, no, who are working in the field. But I realized just now that I'd also have part of my audience, students. You are college students, am I right? No, senior high students. No? So anyway, I would try as much as possible to contextualize what I'm talking about here, to have it, so that we wouldn't be lost. No? When I speak here of, because I was tasked to talk, no, in a panel on civil movements, no, or social movements in the Philippines, no, we have to understand that in the past, it's a part already of Philippine history that we have here a very vibrant civil society. We have cause-oriented groups. We have non-governmental organizations. We have people's organizations who organize the people. No, they fight, no, for the rights, no, of different marginalized sectors through rallies, through petitions. They even run, no, for seats, no, in Congress. No, but on the other hand, we also understand that there are movements. No, this is part, no, of the who do not believe, no, that open mass struggles are enough, no, and they think that in order to fulfill or attain just peace, social justice, no, for the ordinary Filipino people, then they have to take up arms, no, because if you push for change, no, you get tokhang, no, you get imprisoned, no, you get censored, no, so they believe in that, no, and this person, Maya Moore, no, or Roger Felix Salditos, no, is this part, no, of that group, no. So just to put some context, so easy, no, Ariane, no, so this presentation is actually based, no, on the notations and the history of the development of revolutionary cultural work in Panay. It's penned by this guy. That's his picture, no, Roger Felix Salditos, no. He's a writer, he's a painter, he's a cultural worker who had been active, no, among the indigenous peoples and the farmers, no, of Central Panay, no, for the past few decades, from the 1980s up to 2018. He was born in Negros, in Ilog, Negros. He was a seminarian. But during martial law, because of the repression, because of the dictatorship, he saw that we cannot push for genuine change for the people without taking up arms. So since martial law period up to when he was killed just 2 years back, no, he has been part of this armed movement, and we could see that the theme, no, of the works of Maya Moore cannot be separated, no, from the context of his life as a revolutionary, no, who saw that we need to have a social revolution to achieve change, no, for the majority of the people. No, you've heard the song of Bamboo, right? Yung ano, Tatsulok, no? So baliktarin yung Tatsulok. So that's their that's his ideals, no? And why focus on him? Because he's one of the most prolific cultural workers, no, from the ranks of the revolutionary movement here in Panay Island. He's like produced around 400 plus poems, dozens of essays and reportage, countless of paintings and sketches. Most of the paintings, all of the paintings and sketches that I included here, no, are actually he did it. No, he's a visual artist, no, and yun na nga, no, his writings and art depicted social injustices and the people's struggle. Well, because he's a revolutionary, it means that the government is after him, right? So he doesn't work in the open, no? Like he doesn't use his own name, no, to write about the struggles of the farmers, the killings of the indigenous people in ano yan, in Tapas, no, in Capiz, no, or in Hamindan, no. So he uses the pen name Mayamor. But then, no, so he was better known for that name, Mayamor. And he started to use the name Maya Daniel when he began to have online presence on Facebook. No, I think his WordPress is also up. Of course, I don't know Maya more personally. No, we're not connected in any way. I first came across his writings when I was student editor of our campus paper in UP Visayas 10 years back. No, that's a long time ago. And we thought, oh, this is cool. No, there's someone who's writing about the plight of the Tumandok, the Panay Bukidnon from the mountains. So we actually published some of his works in the literary section of our school paper. No, a bit later, I realized that, well, he's actually in Facebook. No, so we became Facebook friends. No, so we're not real friends, but we became friends. So on Facebook, no, so his Facebook account served as a repository of his poems and visual art. So he kind of posted his writings there. I remember, no, I was staying up late. That was on August 14, 2018. That was like the start of the school year in UP Diliman. So I was finishing my syllabus for my classes. No, I teach literature classes and Philippine studies classes in UP. No, when he posted this, that Facebook post, no, just posted 17 poems and visuals. Feel free to share, friends. No, good night. No, the next day, I heard the news, no, that he was actually among 7 rebels who were killed in a quote-unquote shootout, no, with the army and the police, no. But according to the spokesman of the rebel group, no, the Antique 7 did not fight back. Hindi sila nang laban. No, they were actually massacred. According to fact-finding mission, they were unarmed. They were members of the propaganda and cultural staff of the rebel group here in Panay Island. And they were shot one by one in the head. So they were actually summarily executed, no, by members of the state forces. No? So that's why now one of the most prolific writers from this place. No? So for me, actually, the efforts to popularize and introduce the life, the works, and the cause of Mayamor is very important for us, no, as scholars of Philippine studies and cultural studies here in the Philippines, no, which is why when some of my colleagues, these are my colleagues, no, that's me there, they said that, Karlo, no, could you help us in translating, no, the works of Mayamor? Most of his works are written in Karaya and in Hiligaynon, no. So he said that I readily agreed, no, because even if, you know, we might not believe in the armed struggle, we might not believe that there's a need for revolution, but we have to understand, no, that they are an important part, no, of our history, and that they have a legitimate claim, no, as a part of Philippine society, no. So this is one of our work meets. We met in Iloilo City a year back, a few months ago, to discuss how we could popularize, translate, and publish the works of Mayamor, and hopefully we would get one of his books out through the UP Diliman Sentro ng Wika, no, Wikang Filipino later this year, and hopefully another another anthology of his works, no, by 2021 or later this year also through UP Press, no. So this is the reason also why, no, when I was asked by Donna Miranda, if I could join today's panel, no, I thought, I'm not really, well, I do cultural research, no, my scholarship is on cultural studies, but I'm not really into performance, no, I'm not into theater. But then I said that, okay, she told me to give the context of cultural work in Panay, no, and with focus on the radical, no, and the revolutionary side of it. So I thought, well, since I'm doing translation work, no, of the works of Salditos, then maybe this is the right platform, no, to highlight his work, no. So even if this presentation does not actually focus, no, on theater only, I think the work of Mayamor can help illuminate, no, one side of cultural work in the island, which would be incomplete, no, because we have a very vibrant cultural field, no, in the Philippines, in Panay, and in the Western Visayas, especially in Negros, no, but it would be incomplete if we do not account, no, for the contribution of the underground revolutionary movement, no. So just a bit of context, no. From now, I'm getting this part, no, I'm now getting bits, no, from the document written by Mayamor. So just context, no, Panay Island has been the site, no, of many peasant revolts, no, and mass struggles, no, against Spanish and American colonization, no. So you might want to read on that, no, yung the Katipuneros, etc., the cry of Lingkod, etc., no. And if we remember also in the 1950s when there was the Hook Rebellion, most of us know, no, that they are hiding in the mountains of Sierra Madre. They are in Mount Arayat, no. That's why they have been popularized, no, in the ang probinsyano, no, yung mga pulang araw, no. So we see that they are in Central Luzon, no. But it's little known, no, that outside of Luzon, no, Panay Island is the only region, no, which took part, no, in the Hook Rebellion, no. So we have sikat, no, yung Panay for women guerrilla commanders, no, Coronation Chiva, Waling-Waling, and you also have Commander Liwayway, no, the Hook commander, no, who wore lipstick, no, when he fought the the government forces, no. So there is actually a history, no, of this kind of revolt, no, in Panay Island because of social injustice, no, yung farmers, indigenous people being grabbed, no, of their land, getting very high rent, no, for their agricultural produce, no, getting that kind of rural injustice, no. So they join, no, this kind of armed movements, no, and when in September 1972, no, when the Marcos regime, no, declared martial law, no, they imposed dictatorial rule, no, this pushed many writers, artists, no, and cultural workers, no, to actually join, no, the revolutionary movement, no, even here in Panay, no, and so at that time, during martial law, if we remember, Marcos controlled all the media, no, and there was censorship, and writers, journalists, and artists, no, who voiced dissent, no, and who were vocally critical against the dictatorship. You could be imprisoned, you could be killed, no, you could be called for, no, by the military, no. So many of them, if they wanted to continue resisting, no, the abuses of those in power, they joined, no, this movement. And this document of Mayamor actually tries to navigate, no, and explore, no, how cultural work in relation to this movement, no, began and developed, no, with its rise and fall, with its ebb and tide here in the island of Panay, no. So he places the beginnings of this kind of cultural production in the years 1970 to 1971, no, when the armed movement, they sent a team, no, to investigate, to do social investigation, to investigate the conditions of farmers and indigenous people along the border area of Aklan, Iloilo, and Capiz, no. Central Panay yan na lugar, no, because these are mountainous areas, these are porous, yes? I have 5 more minutes. Okay, yeah, I'll try to. You see, so I'll try to summarize this. No, so this was the beginnings. No, but just to sum it up. No, one of the things that the challenges that they have to do is that they wanted to organize people, organize farmers, organize indigenous peoples to fight for their rights, to fight for their welfare, no, and to join their movement. So they tried to use cultural forms to do it. So they did guerrilla theater, they did comics, no, they did newspapers, no, underground newspapers. But then one of the challenges that they had, no, was that in the hinterlands, no, of the island, no, so many of our fellow Panayano, no, are has not reached ano yan, no, elementary, no, and high school level of education. No, so in order to have space, no, for this kind of cultural work, the first thing they did actually was to have literacy and numeracy, no, education programs. They have to teach the farmers and peasants there how to read and to write. No, so this was the beginnings, no, of print, no, and the reading culture, no, in an overwhelmingly oral tradition based area. Just to skip this these parts, no. So another thing that is featured, no, in this in their kind of cultural work is the way they mixed modern and traditional forms. So they made use of folk literature, binalaybay, no, the poem in the local language, no, composo, and adaptation of local songs, no, and infuse this, no, with progressive and revolutionary content, no. Another thing they did, no, that's it. They also released different newspapers, no. So these are some of them: Daba-Daba, Inaway Banwa, no, Partisano, etc., which contained different content, no, editorials, news analysis, etc. Let's skip some of these parts. No, and they saw, no, that this kind of anyway, you could ask me questions later for the details, no, but according to Maya Moore, no, this kind of cultural work, no, which is based in the grassroots, no, which was outside, no, the traditional established institutions, no, reached its highest point around the years 1984, no, to 1987, and for him, no, it was a strong part, no, in educating people and raising their consciousness, and contributed to the eventual overthrow, no, or the fall of the Marcos dictatorship, no, and well, here's the part, no, during this time, this was the time, no, that theater groups flowered, no, in communities, schools. They held big performances, cultural festivals, no, so ano yun, no, yung mga big mobilizations or rallies, yung mga lakbayan, mga welgang bayan became the sites, no, of street theater performances, no, etc. But let's just skip, no, this part, no. So after the martial law period, Maya Moore saw there was a decline in revolutionary cultural work because of the impact of repression, no, from the total war, the low intensity conflict of President Cory Aquino, no, and but around 1992 to onward to the time that he finished writing this in 2005, we saw that there was a resurgence, no, of revolutionary cultural work, no. So one of my conclusions, no, from this document that Maya Moore wrote, no, is that this reveals the rich, no, and complex history of revolutionary cultural work, no, in Panay. It also shows the importance, no, and as well as the often unrecognized difficulties of cultural work when you're advancing radical political struggles, no. I'm now summarizing and concluding. First, no, since the audience, no, are peasant and indigenous masses in rural hinterlands that need to be organized, no, and awakened about their rights, no. So cultural work had to have as its basis, no, basic education. So they had to start, no, with literacy and numeracy programs, no, kasi if they do not know how to read, no, if you don't know how to write, then how could they read your newspapers, no? How could they read your poems, no? How could they read, even understand, no, the content of your comics, no? So the revolutionary movement in the countryside, no, was crucial in introducing a writing culture and a reading culture among the rural masses. Why? No, because from the simple writing of names in recruitment forms, when you have meetings, no, you do minutes, no, you records of your meetings, no. So you have to learn how to read, no, and to write, how to count numbers. No. Secondly, another thing that I could get from this document by Maya Moore is how, because their cultural work seeks to be an instrument of revolutionary struggle, in their jargon, to arouse, organize, and mobilize people, no, to fight for their rights. No, their cultural production is also affected by the tide and ebb, no, or the rise and fall of social movements, no, to which it is attached. No, and in the history, as scholars of Philippine studies, no, we know, no, that the flowering of cultural and intellectual work on a nationwide scale, no, here in the Philippines has been very much linked to people's struggles. No, when was the time when there was the most number of plays, writings, no, produced? No, they say that the golden age was in the 1880s, 1890s, the time of the La Solidaridad, the first propaganda movement, and the revolution of the Katipunan, and then the struggle against American colonialism with the rise of the seditious plays. No, but then the second golden age, no, some of my colleagues in our department say, no, is during the time of the anti-Marcos struggle in the 1970s, no, and in the 1980s, no, which means that it is really linked, no, this kind of richness, this kind of complexity, no, is this kind of sophistication is related to the advance, no, and to the fall of radical political struggles, no, and it's not easy to do, no, because for example, no, you have to contend with harassment and repression, no, at the same time, you also have to contend, no, with if for example how do you preserve, no, and actually archive your artworks, no, if it is performed, no, if pamphlets and newspapers are given out, no, and you have to be always running around, no, because the police, no, or the army might try to look for you, no, and if these documents, no, that are with you, no, are actually would lead, no, people to be arrested, no, so that's some of the challenges, no, that they had to contend with, but some people, no, like Maya Moore, no, they have lived their life doing just that, no, and they have never given up hope, no, until he was killed, no, in 2018, August 14, and I hope that this presentation, no, would give us, no, a more wider perspective, no, that aside from the legal movement and the open forms of cultural work, no, there's also the other side, no, there's the underside, no, the underground, no, which is also an important part, no, of this work. So maybe later, no, I think my two colleagues here, no, could illuminate further the other side, no, of the story, no, not the revolutionary movement, no, but the side, no, that is still, no, that's above ground, no, and works, no, openly, no, with different communities, different institutions, no, and that you do not have to fear, no, that much, no, although right now, no, there's a shifting, no, political climate in the country because of our current government, no, which is like a throwback, not to the Marcos dictatorship. So I'm open for questions later for the details, no, because we have like limited time for discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for sharing your research on what is a very important aspect of the history of Panay and its arts and culture. If you watched the 2018 film Liway, uh, um, which was also set in the same historical period as the subject of Carlos' research, that is hopefully it can help us piece together our appreciation and our understanding of the longer history of the people's movement here in Panay. Now, the presentation focused on the period of martial law, which, according to our speaker, is still continuing. The situation under martial law seems to continue even up to today. Now, many of us were not born during the time of martial law. Our parents, our relatives might have memories of that and try to share it with us. And it's something that we try to learn from different sources, both in school and outside of school. But the story of how the people's movement and all of and how many communities continue to work to social change continues. And our second resource speaker is perhaps also a reflection of how that process continues. Our resource speaker is a cultural worker, a theater and a performance artist. Edwin is the performing arts program head of SICAD, or Sining Kadamay, which is a cultural group aiming to serve the urban poor, especially in the National Capital Region. Now, to further introduce the work that they do and to share his own personal narratives on the role of cultural workers in the people's movement, let us welcome Edwin Quinsayas.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning and hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present our work in CICAD. Like what Lisa said, CICAD is a cultural organization. It is actually a group of volunteer artists practicing different disciplines of the art. So we have volunteer theater artists, visual artists, filmmakers, students and semi-professionals who devote time to help forward or advance urban poor rights among poor communities, particularly in Metro Manila. So CICAD is the abbreviation of Sining Kadamay. So Sining is art, and Kadamay means could be a helping hand, a companion. Yeah. So and CICAD means to kick forward or to advance. And so public symposiums like this tend to be nerve-wracking for me, so I prepared. I will be reading a paper, so I am not scattered. So like what she said, this is a sharing of my personal history upon discovering political theater and how we have persisted over the decades. So please bear with me, and here goes. So theater was one of the extracurricular activities in college that I immediately wanted to do. After watching a play by Wilfrido Maria Guerrero at the University of the Philippines when I was in high school, I told myself I will join a theater group when I go to college. It was a twin bill of the comedy Wanted Chaperone and the drama Three Rats. The energy exchange between the actors and audience during the live performance was very moving and entertaining. I never thought of it much as a career that I would like to pursue, but I knew since then that I want to take theater seriously, which is what I did, staying in a theater organization during my entire time in the university. Student activism introduced me to political theater, or theater with a cause, or back then we call it socially relevant theater. With the fervor and fearlessness that continue to inspire me to this day as a cultural worker and community theater artist, Activists from the Polytechnic University of the Philippines used theater as a creative means to express their condemnation of societal inequalities and the structures that breed them. I was a sophomore when I had my first lead role in an apolitical theater group. I was a blue Christmas songbook who lost his voice in the musical Salty's Christmas Calamity. I was trained to embrace the conventional proscenium stage. At that time, a repressive university president was installed and he was seen as a lackey of then President Fidel V. Ramos, himself coming from the military institution that backed a long-time dictator. The students were up against the university chief's plan to cancel the accreditation of mostly activist organizations inside the campus. It was a clear move to crack down on student militancy, but these were concepts that were not clear to me at the time. What student activist theater clearly showed to me was this. Performers rushed inside the canteen where we were having a snack break from rehearsals. They did a tula-dula. It was a dramatized poetry with tableaus and movement depicting the story of a student activist who became a professor and would eventually become a major figure in the first quarter storm that challenged the rising fascism of Marcos. He fought for freedom, and after his abduction in 1971, was never surfaced since. Towards the end of the performance, a girl sang the chorus of Bayan Ko, a popular protest song of the EDSA uprising. Suddenly, a few students came rushing in. They were soaking wet. They had just been water cannoned at the main gate. A young man called on the students gathered at the canteen to open their eyes to the repression taking its reign inside the campus. Another said some of their colleagues have just been arrested, and then they were gone as quickly as they arrived. In the evening, an activist was knocking at the office doors of student organizations asking for donations for bail of protesters who were arrested. I would later learn that some of the performers at the canteen were among those jailed. And much later, I would discover that the name Charlie Del Rosario, who was the character of the students' performance we witnessed, is the same Charlie Del Rosario from whom the theater space that we are using for our performances is named after. It was the same theater venue where other performing groups are disallowed to use because they were political. And it was a history we never knew and were never told about. I don't remember if I had donated money, but what I clearly remember is that I was irked by the indifference of one of our senior members who remarked, the students should not have protested if they don't have money to pay for bail in the first place. Somehow I felt a connection with the student protesters because I and some batchmates were also struggling from my own organization's system of repression. Silently, I reflected that the issues of the students were fighting for could really be very important if they were ready to risk being arrested. These were actually attacks against academic freedom. These were problems certainly bigger than Salty's Christmas Calamity. So together with some disobedient friends, we dared watch politically charged performances from activist theater groups in school, and I found them very enlightening and engagingly informative. It tackled real people's issues, and I was introduced to themes of rural and urban poverty, of torture and forced disappearances, militarization, gender violence, peace and armed conflict, and many others. Oftentimes, there would be a post-performance talkback, open forum tawag namin dati, between performers and audience that were truly very educational. Theater's efficacy goes beyond the actual performance and is expounded in the interaction of everyone who experienced it. Beyond the staging, what mattered more was how everyone wanted to delve deeper on the issues and how they were being challenged to take action. We saw a musical about the Filipino-American War and the need to persist in the unfinished revolution of the Katipunan, where the play's ending, whether a continuing revolution is still needed or not, depended on the reaction of the audience. We were awed and inspired by the impact of this kind of theater, which we called socially relevant theater, which evoked in us this amazing totality of experience. You witness stories that reflect very contemporary themes. You learn of the passion of actors to deliver sans material and financial support, the camaraderie of activists, and the observed democracy in terms of the hierarchy of the roles in theater not getting in the way of expressing one's opinion. In fact, democratic discussions were encouraged in the process. There was involvement of the audience seeking to better the play's approach or messaging through criticism sessions. There was also an enviable sense of solidarity among the socially relevant theater groups. One remarkable character of these performances is that we would see ordinary people from nearby communities coming inside the university to witness the plays. Because in our apolitical theater group, only the students are our audience. But in these performances, people from the communities, outside communities are coming in. And that was new to us and very interesting. We wanted to replicate this practice, participate in workshops and theater making of these activist theaters, but we were discouraged. We would lose our privilege of exemption from required physical education classes and civil military training as members of the resident theater group in campus. But those were easy trade-offs. We were an apolitical theater group, it was strongly reiterated, despite having staged political theater. For example, Federico Garcia Lorca's La Casa de Bernarda Alba, Ricky Liz Pitik Bulag sa Pabuan ng Pebrero, and others, Rolando Tiño's May Katwiran ng Katwiran. That was a clear absurdity, and the decision to break away from the group became relatively easy. We were tagged by former friends and colleagues as the breakaways, the unruly, the wayward. If we were in the Filipino-American War, we would be tagged as the sediciosos or the seditious, advancing the seditious plays. Nowadays, going against the tide of repression can earn you the military label enemy of the state, or government's insidious tagging of activists as communists, terrorists. But even back then, I felt we were in the right direction to the kind of theater we want to pursue. Our very first production was a dance theater about children's rights, Niños Inocentes. We featured 3 vignettes from compiled news stories and sharing of NGO workers. One was about a girl who died in a refugee camp from hunger, exasperation, and trauma. Second was about a boy who was killed in a car accident while he was selling cloth rugs to buy a special noodle dish for his birthday. And the third was about a girl prostituted by the US servicemen from the military bases. Aside from dance training, we were involved in discussing and improvising the scenarios. We had discussions about children's rights and about the conditions and history of Philippine society and social mass movements. And then finally, I found myself in the middle of a talk back as a performer about the issues we presented as well as our experiences in creating the piece. Theater became a platform to discuss themes that are not or may not be addressed inside the classroom. Performers were challenged to expose themselves to the lives of the characters they represent, to learn more than what is rehearsed in the studio. So they asked us if we had exposure trips to the community, and sadly we were not able to. But suddenly, I found myself in a rather somewhat defensive reaction. I found myself sharing my personal experience with poverty and dislocation. I was a grade 5 pupil when my family was evicted from our home. One day I came from school only to see our house torn down to a skeleton of old lumber and plywood. Our belongings reduced to a volume that fits a small wooden pushcart. I felt ashamed when we had to push the cart 4 kilometers to our new and smaller house. I lost my childhood friends and I had to work in a neighborhood basket weaving enterprise because life became even harder. The busy streets are an almost everyday challenge because I was walking going home from school, so in a way I knew my character and his circumstance. I was the child worker in the play. I decided to become a theater activist, and in pursuing educational discussions about the themes and motivations of our performances, I came to understand 3 basic principles that guided our work, not just in political theater, but also in the larger mass movement that we wish to advance. It is this political mass movement, a people's movement composed mainly and led by the basic sectors of workers and peasants, allied with youth, women, and other progressive middle forces, including artists, fighting for genuine freedom and democracy and seeking to end the country's corrupt-ridden politics, a backward economy still largely feudal and serving big foreign business interests, and a culture of subjugation propping the status quo. Our aligning with this struggle is what defines our work in political theater. To forward this struggle in cultural creative field, as in the other aspect of work of political activism, we were guided by the principle, number 1, serve the people. with the people clearly referring to the toiling masses. Serving them in our practice and experience meant bringing their plight to the fore of public awareness, exposing the culpability of the exploiters and the institutions they control, and highlighting the need for enlightened and collective action to address the ills that afflict the people. A powerful play summed up for me the crucial role these democratic sectors played in ending the horrors of martial law. Chris Miliado's Buwan at Baril sa E-flat major featured five moving stories. A worker and peasant siblings reunite in a huge rally dubbed Lakbayan, symbolizing the decisive solidarity of these classes, the workers and the peasants. An Itawis girl gang raped by government soldiers seeks help from a priest who is also fleeing from state surveillance in the city. A wife collects the remains of her guerrilla husband from a military camp. A middle-class woman composes herself and musters courage as she prepares to join a protest march against the dictator. And a student activist in government wanted list outwits his arresting police officer. We first performed this play at a community in Tondo, where one of the country's huge urban poor populations can be found. It was part of a campaign to raise awareness and gather signatures against attempts by the Arroyo government then to deploy the military in urban centers. And just a few years back, we did a stage reading of the play at a seminary as our contribution to mobilize church support against rising incidents of violent demolitions under the Benigno Aquino regime. Theater serving the people meant for us going out of the confines of the university and into the factories and communities. I became active in an alliance of artist groups called Sining Bugkos, or Solidarity in the Arts, which did organizing work among workers, urban poor, youth, and as well as some professional artists that were mostly musicians. I was assigned to a workers' cultural group, which started out as a composite chorale of unionists from different factories found in the southern part of Metro Manila. They called their group Aklas Sining, or Arts Revolt. Eventually, we ventured into theater performances. Our first theater performance was during their founding anniversary celebration. It not only highlighted the conditions of Philippine labor, slave wage, deplorable working conditions, unemployment, union busting, globalization, but the workers' inherent connection and requisite solidarity with urban poor communities. Hence, issues like violent evictions, lack of social services, rising prices, etc. were also tackled. Workers live in these poor communities and therefore are called to actively organize among men, women, youth, and others in the locality. We performed in a nearby community and all union members were invited to come. It was a concert, a music theater we call it, where workers' protest songs were interpreted in dance and movement scenarios. Preparing for the production is inspired by the principle and practice of mass mobilization. Sinasabi po namin, when rehearsing or creating the performances, the process should also be kilusang masa, or mass movement principle. Meaning, the unions were the project's lead organizations. They tied up with a local community association which secured a venue for the event. It was a basketball court. Days before the performance, we were with the workers serenading houses in the community to drum up invitation for the event. The community helped in physical arrangements and preparing food. The unions provided funds for food and sound system rental. On the morning of the performance, the first quarter storm activists facilitated the discussion on the need for a cultural revolution. Meaning, it was just not about having a performance to render. Political theater utilized different kinds of spaces for intervention. We would perform in canteens of factories during workers' break time. We would render songs and improvise skits connected to a local union campaign, illegal dismissals, wage increase, collective bargaining, union certification election. During strikes, there were solidarity cultural events spearheaded by the union's cultural team. We had performances in public markets and town squares. We were doing flag dances and skits in the sidewalks during big rallies. Workers even performed in university classrooms. They went to schools, raising awareness of their issues among students. Cultural work in the unions contributed to building the capacities of workers, not just in performance. Workers trained to facilitate educational discussions, Performing developed their self-confidence, and some who were previously bashful volunteered to become spokespersons or mass leaders. Long hours of rehearsals and sacrifices in creating performances helped encourage workers to become full-time union organizers. The mid-90s saw the resurgence of the labor movement. I still have time, 5 minutes. All right. So during the mid-90s, there was a huge march that we call the People's March Against Imperialist Globalization. Aklasining members were deployed to the 3 converging sites of the mass demonstrations. So they were active in the huge mass mobilization. In the areas where the mobilization would stop to take a rest or hold a short program, these workers performed tirelessly in these sites. All right. So that is the first part. That is our experience and our interpretation of that principle, which we call the theater or arts serving the people. So the second principle that we learned in our practice is the principle from the masses to the masses, mula sa masa tungo sa masa. Political theater encouraged collective work in building performances, even if there are assigned roles of director or writer or technical director. Consultations and open discussions are so much a part of the mounting process. The masses take the stage and perform where they are situated. Political theater finds its audience and endeavors to transplant itself where they are found. It strives to become necessary in the community. So in Manila, theater companies would find it difficult to develop an audience, but for political theater, theater goes to the audience and finds them, and blossoms and flourishes in the localities. In my present organization, CICAD, this is what inspired us to organize an almost annually our Holy Week event called Kalbaryo ng Maralitang Lunsod, or the Urban Poor Calvary. This protest performance integrates the Christian tradition of the Cenaculo, the play on the Passion of Jesus Christ and the Stations of the Cross, and his 7 last words. But it is a rendition that carries contemporary struggles of the urban poor. Sometimes, depending on the political climate and the opportunities of a big multi-sectoral mobilization, it would be called the People's Calvary, not only the Urban Poor Calvary. So the workers, peasants, or urban poor are the new crucified Jesus Christ, persecuted and murdered by the modern Pontius Pilate, which is US imperialism, the new Herod, the puppet state, the new Caiaphas, the corrupt politicians, and the new centurions, the fascist military. The modern Christ is not a single actor, but a group of performers representing the toiling class, whose deliverance is achieved through collective resistance. A staunch advocate of urban poor solidarity is the feisty woman leader, Carmen Dionida, who is a champion of the cause of poor communities. We did a tribute play, Nanay Maming, because Nanay Maming she is fondly called, to honor her decades-long commitment to the strengthening of the urban poor movement. From multiple cast productions that are always logistical challenges for poor communities, we also did 2 or 3 character plays. Shorter plays are usually a preferred option to consider the many other responsibilities the community activists are playing. In 2015, we did a 3-character play called Gapok, about a family debating whether to fight in the barricades to defend their community or succumb to the money and jobs offered by a land developer. The play was part of a campaign to defend Sitio San Roque in Quezon City, Manila, being evicted by one of the most powerful families in the country, the Ayalas. Also, preparing for the campaign, image theater and improvisational theater workshops were integral to training the leaders in forwarding and negotiating their demands to the local government, because the campaign would require the leaders to face and negotiate local government authorities. And at first, they were apprehensive, but theater was used to develop their self-confidence so that they would be able to comfortably present their issues and their demands in these negotiations. The third principle is makibaka, huwag matakot. Under the present administration, the urban poor experience translates to aggravating crisis and rising fascist attacks. In a scenario more gruesome and vicious, government has also started to clamp down on activists through trumped-up charges and planted evidence. Incidents of peasant and indigenous people killings are on the rise, though second only to the tens of thousands of EJK victims, mostly poor, suspected drug addicts, but all are carried out in utter monstrosity and impunity. In these trying times, our third guiding principle in political theater is resist, do not be cowed. Duterte has surpassed the record of the dictator Marcos without having to formally declare martial law in the whole country. Though that scenario is not too far-fetched, as human rights workers actually warn of a de facto martial law via the President Executive Order number 70, institutionalizing the whole-of-nation approach in counterinsurgency and counterterrorism, which framework does not differentiate terrorism from legitimate political dissent. The war on drugs not only executed people, it is killing human dignity and transgressing basic human rights. It turned neighbors against one another. People wish the death of others in community over a social malady that cannot actually be resolved by executions. In an interview, he admitted that the president admitted that the spate of extrajudicial killings is his fault. He was even casual in ordering parents to kill their drug addict children, and we witnessed that. I heard that personally during his first luncheon event with the urban poor of Tondo. He used the disillusionment of people, particularly the poor, against a cycle of failed regimes and peddled the promise of change to win the elections. Two mothers of EJK victims who were both resource persons and actors in our documentary theater production, which we are going to perform tomorrow, Sa Digmaan ng Halimaw or The Monsters' War, started with the hope that Duterte will be true to his promise. But a year after taking office, their sons were killed by masked assassins who, the mothers strongly believe, are elements of the police. Using their exact words called from the actual interviews we had with them, the mothers say the production helped them take a grip of their sorrow and rage. They say the play has become a platform for them to bring their stories to different communities, sectors, and institutions in their search for justice. The mothers are also actors in the play, not playing a role, but sharing their own life stories. Theirs are painful narratives, but also very encouraging, because there are members now, currently members of the church-based organization Rise Up, empowering families of EJK victims to seek justice through collective action and campaigns. In community performances, there would be, so when we perform these plays, the stories not only told of harrowing death, about the harrowing death of their sons, but also presented them as real people, these victims, as real people, as individuals committing errors in their lives, as human beings struggling to better their lives in a system cursed with poverty, as loved ones who are also their source of joy and strength. In community performances, there would be individuals from the audience who would come up to them or to one of the staff and share their similar stories. The mothers would talk to them and encourage them to visit the Rise Up office and eventually join them in the cause. The Duterte regime is more ferocious and brutal than Marcos. Political activists now, therefore, are challenged to not only learn from the courage and resilience of the anti-Marcos dictatorship activists, but also to surpass their fearlessness and commitment. The same is true for theater activists and cultural workers, and it is a challenge we are trying to earnestly take up every day. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Edwin, for sharing living experience, buhay na karanasan, about how theater and performance can tell the stories of our lives and the lives of communities. We have been treated to something like a crash course in Philippine history, no? Because 1970s, 1980s, the period of martial law, then Edwin was talking about his own growth as a cultural worker from the 1990s up to the present. And like what he said, you'll be able to see one of their outputs, which is the play tomorrow. Before we go to the response and to the discussion of and the input of our discussant, I would just like to show a brief image, a slide, which perhaps our presenter, Ariane Carandang, whose situation I talked about earlier, probably would have also emphasized today, and that is the work that she does as an organizer as the artistic director of Sinag Bayan, or Sining na Naglilingkod sa Bayan, or Arts for the People. I mentioned that Sinag Bayan serves rural communities, farmers' communities, and Karlo and Edwin were talking about people, whether personal narratives or from the archives, who devoted their lives to serving the people in different ways through theater and community performance. And one of the issues that Ariane's group is campaigning for right now is the release of an artist and a community theater worker named Alvin Fortaliza. This is very close to home because Alvin Fortaliza is based in Bohol. No? Si Alvin, she is the artistic director of a group called I cannot pronounce, Bolanong Artista nga May Diwang Dagohoy, or Bansiwag Bohol. No? And this is a community theater group. The slide says, "Free the artist, free Alvin Fortaliza," because last March 4, 2019, almost 1 year ago, Alvin was arrested in Gindulman, Bohol, while she was serving as a provincial coordinator of a group called Anak Pawis Party List. It was the election season back then, the election campaign season. So if you remember, there were lots of posterings, leafleteerings, and their group was conducting these campaign activities for Anak Pawis and for then senatorial candidate Nery Colmenares, whose roots hail from Bohol. Then suddenly, Alvin was arrested by the military and the police. She was charged with fake charges against her. She was accused of murder and such, which were not true. But up to now, she remains in prison in Bohol. No? But I will not focus on the case on the details of the arrest and the charges, but instead, we just wanted to share a bit about what Alvin's group is doing. Bansiwag Bohol and Sinag Bayan, of which Alvin Fortaliza is the vice president for the Visayas, they have been conducting cultural work and community theater workshops among the youth, probably people as young or younger than you. They've been holding activities such as Renga sa Kultura, the biannual youth performance competition, and the Alayon Project, which mobilized volunteers for natural calamities, such as the 2013 earthquake in Bohol. So what their group does is to conduct basic integrated arts workshops for the youth of Bohol, Negros, and Cebu. They also participate in many public performances. And Alvin, as the head of Bansiwag Bohol, was one of the cultural workers here in the region who were at the forefront of that kind of work. But as we know now, she is still in prison. And that kind of, these kinds of human rights violations happen to cultural workers even up to now. You must have heard of the arrests in Negros last November 1, October 21, where many activists, including members of a group called Teatro Obrero, or Workers' Theater, were arrested on one night and detained for some days. The theater group which was arrested, many of them were rehearsing for a play about the situation of farmers during that time. And one happened even to be a Cap Negros member, a very young member. So that is the kind of situation that many of our colleagues are facing today for doing things such as community theater workshops, trying to tell the situation of our country through their art. So on behalf of Sinagbayan, Concerned Artists of the Philippines, and other groups who are campaigning and calling for the release of Alvin Fortaleza, and we'd like to share this situation with you because this is something happening very close to home, no? And something which is still ongoing. And people, community theater workers like Alvin, they need all the help that they can get from the rest of us. And from here, we will proceed to the portion where we will hear inputs from our discussant for today. With a background in psychology and educational theater, our discussant is a multidisciplinary artist herself who works with communities in Iloilo and elsewhere, and she currently heads the University of San Agustine's Fine Arts program as a professor. To further introduce herself, the work that she does, and to integrate Karlo and Edwin's sharing, let us all listen to Maria Rosa Licerudo.
Maayong agagid sa inyong nga tanan. Kung may ihambal ako nga tinaga, gusto ko mabatian na isa kapakpak. Kung ini siya, nakarelate ka mo. Nabatian ninyo, kag naintindihan ninyo. Kung kusog gid ang imo pakpak, kaya mo nang imo nga nakarelate ka gid. Dalom gid ang imo nga relations. I'm saying, I'm going to say words as a point of reference. If these young people really understood some of the terms that we were mentioning, I'd like to know if they can relate to some of these words. And if I say these words, I'd like them to clap once. And if they feel so passionate about this word, they will clap with, you know? I want to see that passionate clap. If it's just maybe, you know, maybe a little bit. I know a bit of this word. I heard about it in the newspaper. Yeah, okay. So before I want to react to this panel, I'd like to know, how are you relating to the terms and the terminologies from the history of the revolutionary movement in the Philippines, especially in the country? Ambush. Repression. Rally. Communists. Academic freedom. Poverty. Maraming palakpak sa likod. Conflict. Massacre. EJK. These words may be a little bit different and may sound different, but I think I grew up in this country with a lot of disaster. This country, you name it. You want volcanic eruption, you want environmental tsunami disaster, you want developmental disaster, and worst, human disaster, human rights violation. So you name it, political disasters. And I grew up in the martial law years. My first vocabulary was ambush, foxhole, strafing. Diba? May mga amuna, mortar attack, mga amuna, mga... Then I realized we're actually in a very revolutionary movement. You know, as an innocent child, you thought it's normal to have an ambush. It's normal to have people get tortured. May battalion of militaries everywhere. Then you realize later that we are in a very repressive government. And then, you know, when you were young, as you maybe 16, 18, then you begin to ask, what is happening in my country? Am I a Filipina who's just going to be a sex worker in Japan? Am I going to be a Filipina who's going to work abroad to send money because my father is a sugarcane worker and cannot send me to school? Do I go to become a domestic helper? I was hopeless. I was surrounded by sugarcane. I thought sugarcane is sweet. When I learned the story of sugarcane workers, I will never waste a small spoonful of sugar, because this is the blood and sweat of the plantation workers who suffer a great deal in this country to make other people richer. And you know, those beautiful houses are actually made of sugar, but not sweet sugar, bitter sugar. So the story of our people is very bitter, not sweet. But then I see in this story, it's not as so different from now. I think we are still seeing bloodshed. We're still seeing maybe even worse. It's not anymore just in the boondocks, but it's just right in your houses, or maybe it can be just in the public markets. It can just be in the school. It can just be in any streets in this country. Is it really so different from 1970s? But what I saw from these amazing, talented, passionate people, I'd like you to give them 5 powerful, loving, passionate clap. Go! Woo! We need people like this. People who actually choose to be activists. One, to be activist is you use your talent. They use their pen, their words, their music, their dance as their weapons, as their words, as their way to resist, as their way to fight back. Very creative. And most of these theaters are happening in the markets, in the streets, maybe in the roads. Doesn't have to happen here. It can happen inside the canteen. It can happen inside the jeepney, inside the bus. I'd like to hear a clap if you've seen a beautiful, powerful theater that speaks of a social issue or social justice. Theater? Only 3? Okay. So wala pa talaga ditong theater. Okay. Do you want to watch a theater? Okay. So this is the beautiful, I think, time. This is the time to actually for you to also feel, what are you called for? These people felt they're called for to get out of their comfort zones. One is a researcher from UP who got so moved and inspired from a story of one powerful man. He decided to research. Why? He doesn't want na mawala. That story is just going to die with that person. He wants to continue to tell the world about this person, this poetry, these powerful people. So his death is not going to be wasted. He gave his life, and I saw also sacrifice. I saw self-sacrifice. I saw a lot of self-giving, struggle. Mainit kaya yung maging theater artist, no? Walang aircon doon, no? Wala, no? Sobrang grabe ang passion. That's what I saw. A lot of talent, and they give so much. Not only of resisting, persisting, but being an activist is doing something about it. Yes, you see that there is something repressive. There's something that, did you dare ask the question? Hello, why is our, So I'd like this, one beautiful, shout out. I'd like you to think of an issue that you'd like to ask, or an issue that is so social issue or social justice issue na you want to address, or what is your concern right now. Okay, at the count of 3, think. The count of 3, you're going to shout it out. Ask the question. Bakit mataas ang tuition ko? Whatever. Ready? In 3 counts. 1, 2, 3. Okay. At least you have a question. Okay, we start from there. And then, maybe, it is also beautiful when you can do something about it. What are you good at? Okay? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? And then, what do you want to stand for? Those are 3 questions maybe that I actually got from inspiration from these 2 people here who are willing to even risk their lives to stand up for something. 2 words. You want to be apathetic, walang pakialam, manhid, or empathetic, may malasakit, gustong makialam, at gusto ring makisabay, at gusto ring mag-organize. You want also to be part of a movement, and you want also to be able to be counted also in the history. Take accountability. How do you take responsibility? What is it for you? What is sacrifice for you? What is assertion? What is it to resist? What is it to be an activist? What do you stand for? So the Panay struggle is not going to be wasted. Maybe in different contexts, the urban poor, the poverty there. I see also the struggles of the plantation workers, and they have to resort to even armed struggle because some of their questions are not answered. And they have to risk their lives and really fight for what they believe is right. And so I saw tapang, courage. I saw yung pinaglalaban, yung pag-take ng responsibility at accountability. I saw somebody took a stand at kamulatan, awareness, nag-organize. I saw that, alam mo yung being an artist, I think what matters to me also as a person, as an artist, is when my work impacts the grassroots. It's when my work really impacts the margins. And that maybe I feel I am relevant to what I'm doing. What are we going to contribute in our own communities? There's so many things. Sinabi nyo kanina, may mga issues din kayong gustong pag-usapan, but there are things that maybe you can do about it in your own way, in your own poetry, in your own songs, in your own music, in your own dances. And theater is the most democratic, no? Because it actually is such an inclusive, you can be part of it, you can free yourself, and it's an expression of freedom. Super pop, freedom. And you see the power of one and the one collective. The power of one, Roger Felix Salditos, aka Marumar, one person was able to create that movement. We're coming from revolutionaries of, lineage of revolutionaries. You heard of Teresa Magbanwa. Taga Dien? Taga? Sa? Putotan, yes. So we have revolutionary people in this land, and we know that they fought not only the Spanish, the war, but they are actually intellectuals also. They wrote, they published. And I saw that these artists made use of their talents. That is the most important part, I think. And one of the things I got so inspired today is to see that somebody stood up on behalf of the powerless. Somebody stood up on behalf of those who are voiceless. Somebody stood up for those who never had the chance to speak or given a chance for education, given a chance to express their rights. Somebody stood up. Are you going to be one of those who will stand up for others who are oppressed? Others who are bullied by classmates? Are you going to be one of those who will stand up for the right of your other classmates? Yes! I want to hear it. Are you going to stand up for people who are bullied in the school? Yes! Okay. Are you going to stand up against the bullies? Okay. Nice to hear that, no? For very young people like this, beautiful to hear that you are convicted to do something in your own way. And that's so beautiful to hear. And from your favorite author of Harry Potter, sino? Sabi niya, the power of empathy leading to collective action saves lives. Ang sabi niya, human beings can understand and be sympathetic with another person. And that is actually true. And all we need to be able to create something and make a difference on our own is to have our own activism. Maybe it can start with imagination. You imagine what you can do, what are you passionate about, what are you good at, and what are you going to stand for. Wala pa akong time limit. So I think it's also very important to understand that we can also touch others people's lives by even just existing. But how much more if we step forward? And you can do that in your own way. Who writes poems? Poems. Who likes writing here? Poems? Yes, meron. Singing. Making songs. Ang dami. Ayun, si Sir may. Ayun. Ano yung ginagawa ng iba? Mahilig kumain? Okay. Okay lang yan. Magpalusog kayo. Kailangan malakas kayo. Okay? But I hope that this inspires you also, the power of one and the power of the collective. And of course, wag nating kalimutan ang kwento. We keep on telling the story. That's why in Escalante, they keep on reenacting the Escalante massacre every year. They don't want people to forget and trivialize what happened to their own community. They continue on telling the story. And you will hear about it, more about it this afternoon. Why people continue to tell their stories. So with that, I think, bayan muna bago sarili, sabi nga kanina, para sa bayan. Ilan ba sa inyo ang gagawa nito? Bayan muna or gagawa ng kakaibang istorya. Maybe you can make a difference in this country. Who knows? We can be everyday heroes, no? Not the heroes who die and we say, but we don't waste our lives. But at least we stand for something. So I hope you dare to ask the questions, and I hope you dare to do something. I think that's it for now. Madamo gid nga salamat.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Rosa, for the insights and for the challenge for everyone here in this room. Ano? Now we will go to the open forum, no? Where you can ask questions, respond, give comments to what our panel has been saying. So our panel is here to answer these questions. So right now, I'm opening the floor to anyone here who wants to ask and respond. No, wag mahihiya po. No, we have 30 minutes or 20 minutes for for the Q&A. And is there anyone who would want to start? Kanina marami kayong tanong. Ayun, no. Anyone who wants to ask or share something that they have, no? Siguro I'll start with asking the panel, what were the important lessons that you learned from listening to each other? No? From each other sharing. So what, of course, you mentioned so many things, mayaman sa information, but what stayed with you with what each said? No? So anyone can answer to start.
For me, I think because I'm working in Manila, and Carlo's presentation is about the revolutionary culture work in Panay, and even if it's a different group of people, like focused on the peasants, and our work is focused on the urban poor, it's really the same. The issues are really the same. The persistence of poverty is still there, and the need for culture and the arts, and specifically for political theater, which is what we do, to really continue to struggle and to make itself available to the communities as an instrument to empower them. And the danger is always there, because going against the status quo would always mean that you would be tagged as the enemy of the state, when in fact you just dream of a better future, just dream of genuine change. You do not even only dream of your own personal dreams and development, but also for your fellow men, for your fellow Filipinos. And achieving that really means trying to strengthen the solidarity and really pushing forward and doing the sacrifice, because I think in our experience, you cannot do anything but to really push forward if we want real change. And I think it's the same for the peasants in Panay, and it's also the same for the urban poor in Manila.
I very much appreciated no, the talks of my co-panelists earlier. If you've noticed, no, my presentation was the product of archival research. So even if I am actually involved in the struggles of teachers in Quezon City, I'm involved with a group of activist teachers there, the Congress of Teachers for Nationalism and Democracy in UP. There's a certain distance no, in my presentation because I'm talking about a part of the past. No, these are the grand ideals of this person. No, someone who offered his life for the people, no, for the revolution, for a theater that has a cause. No, but in the subsequent discussion, we are able to see how the principles, no, the ideals that he represented and that he actually tried to implement, no, and it inspired, no, a movement here in Panay are not just abstract, no, ideals, but they are embodied, no, in the actual experience, no, of an individual, no, who was inspired by the same calls for serving the people, for using theater to advance, to give voices to the marginalized. And I think these stories are very important today, no, in this time when we are taught to think that we can't do anything, no, because he is close with those in power, so we just have to keep quiet, and maybe in the future things will be better. No, of course not. No, things will not be better if we do not stand up. No, if we do not call out abuses. And also I appreciate the talk. I learned a lot, no, from the talk of Ma'am Rose because my talk it's something far removed from our experience. So me, I was not born during the time of martial law. I was born in 1987, a year after Marcos was overthrown. No, and I like the way that probably because of Ma'am Rose's background, no, in the arts, no, in the performing arts, so the way that these experiences, no, personal experiences and abstract historical experiences are related to your day-to-day, especially I just learned earlier that our audience here, some are senior high school students, no, could be related to our day-to-day experiences. So I think I learned a lot, no, from this panel. In UP, we have a subject that teaches the history and the cultural production during martial law, no, to students, college students, and I think parts of the discussion today, especially I'm very excited for the discussion this afternoon, no, on the experience of a political theater in Negros. No, I'll be taking a lot of notes because very crucial, no, in our history, not just of repression, because Filipinos have been repressed for a long time, but repression always goes with resistance, no, with standing up, with voicing out our concerns. So that's all.
And I'd like to add also, I think as an artist, I think one of the most beautiful thing as a gift to us is we're able to create, no, the power of each one of us. No, we're given that power to imagine, to create, and then you can choose to be a cultural worker or to become a social worker. But at the same time, you can also put that in together. One, for me, being a teacher, at the same time, I do engage in the community with my students like your age. I choose to work in the community. Instead of just art for art's sake, yun yung sabi ko kaninang apathy, yung walang pakialam, so wala lang, di ba? Wala lang. But I'd rather choose to have the empathy or merong social justice issue na, magpipinta kami, for example, sa sari-sari store, no? Pakikipag-usap sa mga fishermen, gagawa ng film about ng buhay nila. Kasi gusto ko yung merong impact yung ginagawa. So hindi lang parang, gusto ko lang, art for art's sake. Pero kung minsan, mas maganda kung yung ginagawa mo, makakabuti sa mas maraming tao. Di ba? So yun yung lesson ko, Len. Why siguro nasa teaching ako? Kasi part ng advocacy, no? Kasabay yung mga batang ito na magaling, na marami pang energy. Di ba? Okay, sige.
Thank you. No? Now we have a question from here. So please introduce yourself, your name, any special talent, so we can recruit you. Joke lang. Just the name, and the grade. No? Ayan.
Hello. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is J. Rose Bunda. I am from Capiz National High School under the Humanities and Social Sciences strand. So as the third speaker no, mentioned earlier about a quote, Bayan Muna. So this is more like a realization of from me and to my other fellows here that it is very, I'm so amazed to see the vision of activists or the artists like you that you are serving your country first before yourself, because this is more like making a change not only for your own sake, but also for the sake of our country, of our community, for the future, for the near future. So thank you so much no, for sharing those insights that really change our perspectives, as well as this is another knowledge as a humanities and social sciences students, because we are also learning Philippine politics and governance. So it is as well an addition to our knowledge and perspectives about what being a social change or a social activist are like. And it's not just being a political thing, but also creating art to showing the truth and reality of our society nowadays. And of course, by putting the past into the present and putting it until the near future, to sharing it and keeping it until the end. Thank you.
Thank you for your response, J. Rose. Thank you. No? How about here, sa gitna? From the middle, yes?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm John Iturali Jr. from Philomar Christian University. Thank you so much, by the way, ma'ams and sirs, for sharing a very informative discussion about the role of art, especially in today's society. Because it's like akin to what my professor have mentioned, that if you stay blind or passive during the time of oppression, then you are an enabler of an oppression. So my question goes this way: why is it difficult for people to fight against injustice? And why do we stay blind or passive during oppression?
Anyone? Is the question addressed to anyone? Okay. So anyone can answer.
So why is it difficult to fight oppression? Because, well, in our experience and also in the histories that have been presented, it is clear that to fight oppression means you are up against the establishment. You're up against the institutions, the ruling institutions of government, of society, which wields the primary institution of force. Because the intention is for the social system, which does not benefits the majority of the people and only benefits a few, that system should be retained. It should not be changed. And if you go against that, then automatically you are oppressed, you are suppressed, and the military is used against you. So it's really very difficult because you're risking really your life. But aside from violence, there's also the aspect of the cultural subjugation or the influencing the minds of people into accepting that, number one, the system works, the system is okay, or even if there is widespread poverty, then maybe the right thing to do is just to take care of yourself, better your own family, and leave the others to themselves. And in that way, or completely denying the presence of these injustices, like in the cases of the extrajudicial killings, that the police is saying that these drug addicts are being killed by the fellow drug addicts in the syndicate. It may be true, but there are other institutions that are saying otherwise, that the police are are really involved. The military, the police establishment is really involved in the killings, and it's not being heard. It's not being effectively addressed by government. Even a huge international human rights organization, the Human Rights Watch, already released a report about it, but government just wants to put this aside. So the reality is being denied. So then, and if these things are not being discussed in the mainstream media, then, and if people are not really going to the communities where all these killings are happening and hearing from the families of the victims themselves, and you just see these stories, the news stories being peddled by the authorities in media, then you would believe that, okay. So it's okay for me to just stay quiet and not be involved, because anyway, I'm not involved in the first place. I'm not affected by it until the time that a relative is killed, which is also the case for many other families of EJK victims, particularly the mothers that we interviewed during that time, when the president was elected. They were really for Duterte, looking for change and saying, yeah, Duterte can really give them the change that they need. But now, it's the reverse story.
No, I'd like to extend the argument of Edwin regarding the fact of cultural subjugation. Because as a people, we consume media. We are cultured by certain ideas. We are taught certain ideas when we grow up. We go to school. That we have to follow the authority. We have to be obedient. Those in power, you cannot touch them. So you have to play safe, etc., etc. Which means that we have been conditioned to accept that there is injustice in the system, and that it's very hard to break. From the time that you were young, up to the time that you're in school, that's what you have been conditioned to believe in, And at the same time, when you are trying to fight, injustice, try to stand up, to those in power, there's the reality of asymmetry. Because if you are part of a workers' organization, if you are theater group organizing urban poor, you have less access to resources. You don't have much money. For example, if you are organizing farmers who are going to be displaced by the construction of a subdivision there, so the real estate magnate, they are the head of DPWH. They have the most voted senator. They have lot of clout, but sino kayo, if you're just farmers, so there's the asymmetry of power, So if you want your side to be heard in media, so you have to pay for the fare, going to the radio station, going to the newspaper. You have to going to meetings, because if you're poor people, if you're farmers, so you have to work every day, just to get by, So that's an added layer of thing to do. If you organize yourselves into an association or into a union, so you don't have much access to media, and to certain institutions that could redress or give you justice. So that's why it's a bit difficult, especially in a highly socially stratified a country like the Philippines. So it's very hard to fight repression. And even in our case, in UP, supposedly UP daw, you don't send your children there, they become activists. It's the bastion of being vocal. Mga woke daw yung mga taga-UP, But even as professors, we had a hard time trying to fight to include the teaching of the martial law, to teach it to students there, because there's a powerful lobby from the Marcoses to stop that. And they have support from certain administrators, certain faculty who want to revise history and erase the reality of abuse, corruption, and human rights violations during the Marcos time. And another thing is, aside from the conditioning, there's also fear. Especially in times of dictatorship and during the time today, under Duterte, there's always fear of, if you speak up against those in power, baka matokhang ka. That's why we have to take to a grain of salt yung sinasabi sa mga survey na, wow, he's the most popular president. No, because if you are an ordinary person, you're an urban poor, you are asked by the surveyors that, do you like Duterte or not? Siyempre, you wouldn't say that you hate him. Baka balikan ka doon. No? And sabihin, ito sila yan. Mga antay yan sila dyan. No? So, it's very hard. No? But throughout history, we know, no, 300 years under the Spaniards. No? We have 40 years under the Americans. We have like 2 decades under Marcos. No? Filipinos, no, despite repression, you know, they just resist. So we must be optimistic and we must have hope. And we are gathered here today, no, from different countries in Southeast Asia. We'll be talking about theater for a cause, and I think it's a good thing that we are here.
I have some thoughts. Sometimes it's hard to fight or to stand up for something if you feel like you are alone, no? And then maybe it's good to find that kind of community where you share the values, no? And you can have a discussion, and so you can also get enlightened by other people's opinions. And also, kung minsan, pagutom ka, wala kang pamasahe, hindi ka dapat makaka-organize, no? Resources then is also limited sometimes, that it also stops you from doing. And there's this culture of silence in a lot of the small islands because we are divided by islands somehow. They're also different. It's good now in your time. It's just in your hands. You can actually see the whole world, what's happening in the whole world. Before, you wait for 2 months to get your letter, and then you open, you know, every afternoon, 3 o'clock. But, you know, you don't just get your letter. You know, now you have the access. And I think you can also use that now as part of really putting it out there, no? The things that you want to talk about. And use that social media maybe in a positive way, that people are able to campaign. Have you heard of Avaas? Avaas is just an email campaign, but they're mobilizing 30 millions. No? So for one issue, 30 million people will reach Avaas. You can online Google it and you can put up your campaign there or something. And you can actually indulge with other people who are also doing that. So for young people like you, I think, because you are more into social media, there's a lot more you can do. Kasi parang limitless yung possibilities for you now. There's just so much more that you can connect. But in your own school, maybe you can also start with your clubs. Diba? In your clubs.
Thank you very much. It's 12 o'clock and we will have to conclude this afternoon forum, but it's concluding on a very good note. The question asked was, why is it so hard to fight oppression? But from the stories that were shared and from the insights that our panelists and our discussant gave, there is hope, and we find that resistance and fighting against oppression has been happening throughout history and even up to now. So resistance is there, it's happened, it's here, and it is real. And hopefully this panel was able to give you some stories to start with. So from the stories of individuals, of individual people, it's possible to also look at the history, larger and longer histories of movements that comprise our nation, and from different narratives of history that they've shared, whether that is something as research or something very personal, we will have something to relate to our own stories and how we write our own stories as we grow. So with that, our panel would like to thank all of you today. Please feel free to approach our resource speakers after this, and we're going to end. Let's give our panel for Theater for a Cause a big round of applause. Thank you.